If you could stand on the edge of the Cooper River in 1740, the first thing you would notice isn't the skyline, it's the overwhelming power of the Atlantic. You wouldn't see the colorful Rainbow Row in its modern, manicured form, or the luxury boutiques of King Street. Instead, you would be standing in one of the most fortified, ambitious, and wealthiest ports of the British Empire in North America. The air would be a thick, heavy mixture of salt spray, the tar and timber breath of a working harbor, and, somewhere down the waterfront, the sour, fermenting reek of indigo dye being processed in vats near the wharves. To the original settlers who moved here from Albemarle Point in 1680, this peninsula, Oyster Point, was a strategic masterpiece, a narrow finger of land protected by 2 rivers and the open sea. But to the world, Charleston was the glittering jewel of the Low Country, a city that grew so fast and so rich that it felt more like London or Barbados than the rugged wilderness of the surrounding colonies. In this video, I'm using modern AI tools to breathe life into the colonial maps, architectural sketches, and panoramas of the 18th century. We aren't just looking at a postcard, we are stepping into a city that was a collision of English ambition, French Huguenot grace, and the deep, indelible influence of West African culture, long before it was ever a part of the United States. The goal is to feel the sea-damp heat on your skin and hear the heavy thud of rice barrels on the wharf when the city was a daring gamble between immense wealth and constant peril. If you enjoy this journey into the past, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our future reconstructions of history's lost worlds. Before the grand mansions of the Battery were built, Charleston was a walled city, one of the most heavily fortified towns in the English colonies. By the 1740s, the Grand Model, the early plan laid out for Oyster Point in 1680, had taken a rigid, elegant shape. In these early colonial maps, you can see the city as a tight grid, protected by bastions and a main gate at the end of Broad Street. The architecture of this era tells the story of a people obsessed with status, but forced to adapt to a climate they didn't fully understand. You would see timber-framed houses with steep-pitched roofs, a style brought from the colder climates of Europe, which trapped the South Carolina heat like an oven. The AI Reconstruction shows us the reality of the 1740s. Streets paved with ballast stones and crushed oyster shells that became a blinding white glare under the midday sun, and the curtain wall along the waterfront that stood as a hard line against enemies, tides, and storm surge alike. One of the busiest spots in the city wasn't a church or a parlor, but the public market. Imagine standing there in 1750, watching small boats and work skiffs bringing in the day's catch, while the air filled with the sounds of the Gullah language, a rhythmic blend of English and West African tongues. You'd see the first brick structures rising, like the Powder Magazine on Cumberland Street, built in 1713, or the Pink House on Chalmers Street, made of Bermuda stone. These were signs that Charleston was moving past its frontier phase and becoming a true colonial capital. Unlike other settlements, Charleston didn't just grow, it refined itself. However, the city we see today was actually forged in the ashes of catastrophe. Charleston has always lived in a cycle of destruction and rebirth. Looking at this historical engraving of the Great Fire of 1740, you can see the terror of the flames, consuming the wooden heart of the city. Starting on a November afternoon near the waterfront, the fire destroyed over 300 houses and commercial buildings, and some of the most valuable warehouses in the city. When the city rebuilt, it did so with a new sense of permanence. This is when the Charleston Single House began to spread across the peninsula. These buildings were a stroke of architectural genius. Only one room wide, with a false front door leading onto a long side porch or piazza, designed to catch the doctor's breeze coming off the harbor. The AI reconstruction shows these homes with their thick brick walls and heavy lime wash, designed to resist fire and humidity alike. In these architectural drawings from the late 1750s, you can see the blueprints for St. Philip's Church and the rising spire of St. Michael's. As the city became more fire-resistant and grand, it also became dense and Mediterranean in feel. You would have smelled the lime mortar and the scent of jasmine from the hidden interior courtyards that the wealthy used to escape the noise of the dirt streets. The 1770s brought a period of intense tension and unprecedented drama. Charleston was among the wealthiest cities in the 13 colonies, and that wealth made it a prime target. In 1771, the old Exchange and Provost dungeon was completed at the foot of Broad Street. It was a massive Georgian Palladian building that served as the commercial and social hub of the city. But beneath its elegant floors lay a dark, damp cellar that would soon hold prisoners of war. In this painting of the waterfront in 1776, you can see the pride of the city as they repelled the British Navy at the Battle of Sullivan's Island, using a fort made of spongy palmetto logs that soaked up the impact of British shot. But the victory was temporary. By 1780, the city faced its greatest existential threat during the Siege of Charleston. Imagine the tension as the British Army, led by Sir Henry Clinton, tightened the noose around the peninsula for 6 long weeks. The AI reconstruction shows the chaos within the walls, the sky lit by heated shot that set buildings ablaze, and the terror of the citizens as they realized the harbor that once brought them gold was now a trap. When the city finally surrendered on May 12, 1780, it began a brutal occupation. You would have seen British soldiers in their red coats patrolling the piazzas of grand homes, while the bells of St. Michael's were taken as a prize of war and carried off, only to be recovered and returned later. The end of the Revolution launched a period of transformation. In 1783, Charlestown was officially incorporated as Charleston, and the city began to expand beyond its old colonial walls. This era saw the rise of the federal style of architecture, visible in the intricate ironwork and grand circular staircases of mansions like the Nathaniel Russell House, completed in 1808. The AI highlights the shift in the city's atmosphere. The grit of the war was being replaced by a polished antebellum splendor. But as this reconstruction shows, the growth of Charleston was fueled by its deepest moral contradiction. By the 1820s, the city had become one of the major collecting and selling centers of the domestic slave trade. In these harrowing images of Charleston's streets and markets, you can see the reality of auctions and sales that took place in the heart of the city. Beneath the glamour of the St. Cecilia Society balls and the thoroughbred horse races, there was the grim reality of a world built on human bondage. Standing near Broad Street and the waterfront in 1830, you would see the height of luxury passing by, the sight of human beings being sold as cargo. The wealth of the Rice Kings was etched into every brick of the city, but it was a wealth that carried a heavy shadow. It was a city of extreme beauty and extreme cruelty. As we reached the mid-1830s, the city was once again forced to rebuild from the ground up. On the night of April 27, 1838, a fire broke out behind a house near King Street, and before the city could stop it, a fierce wind carried it across Charleston. It swept through the peninsula, consuming nearly 150 acres and more than 1,000 buildings. This catastrophe was the final blow to the old wooden city. In its wake, the state financed rebuilding, and the city tightened its fire limits and building rules, pushing new construction in the city center toward brick and masonry. This is why the Charleston we see today feels so unified. It was literally born from the ashes of 1838. The AI reconstruction shows the city in 1840 as a titan of stone and brick, with the newly completed Greek Revival buildings, like the Hibernian Hall and the Charleston Hotel, dominating the streetscape. By 1840, Charleston was no longer an experiment or a frontier outpost. It was a mature, defiant capital of the South, a city with a long memory and a soul that no other place on earth could replicate. Its streets were a museum of endurance, of a people who had survived hurricanes, sieges, and fires, and who built a world that was both fragile and eternal. Sometimes, when I look at these AI-restored images of the Cooper River at sunset, I wonder if the people living there knew how much the world was about to change. They were standing at the peak of their power, unaware of the storms that the mid-19th century would bring. These bricks and these stories are the DNA of the modern Holy City. I really appreciate you joining me for this walk through time. To the locals, to those who grew up here or have deep family roots in this soil, and even to those who just once called this place home, did you see the bones of the city you know in these reconstructions? Your feedback is what drives this journey. Let me know in the comments, which city do you want to see brought back to life next? Until next time.